F23 just randomly remembered this incident that happened to me when I was a child. I've told a few people about it, including my mom and my boyfriend, but mostly keep it to myself since it doesn't really come up in my mind that much. But I just watched some paranormal/demonic videos on YouTube and wanted to share. When I was around 5 or 6, my dad bought his first house after we lived in an apartment for most of my young life, and when we moved in, things were mostly normal. The house would creak, but my dad chalked it up to being settling noises since the house was newly built. It had no history, and we were the first family to move in there. I used to be fairly scared of paranormal and demonic instances. I had a few of them in my life previously, and I also had anxiety starting from a very young age, so any strange noise in the house would tip me off and I'd become so scared I'd have to sleep in my dad's bed to fall back asleep. My dad obliged until my stepmom moved in and felt it was time I needed to learn self-soothing and stop coming into their bed whenever I got scared. I was around 8 or 9 at this time. Now one very specific night, something extremely scary happened, and the worst part is, I don't even remember it. My parents still swear to this day that it happened and are equally as puzzled as me that I have no recollection. What I remember is waking up at night sleeping on my stomach. I have no idea what time it was. I remember hearing 2 very distinct growling noises from under my bed. It wasn't like a dog growl or a human faking a growl. It was very primal, deep, and menacing to say the least. For further clarification, we had no pets at this time, so there's no way it could have been a dog. But for some reason, in my sleepy state, I fell back asleep almost immediately. I just remember the growling, then blacking out almost. It's weird to me to think about because I know if I was conscious in that moment, I would have at the very least sat up and screamed. I was an easily scared child and still am as an adult. I suddenly remember awaking in my parents' bed and sitting up, not remembering how I made it there. Immediately, they both sat up with me as if they were only lightly sleeping and asked me if I was okay. I told them I was confused and tired. I apologized for somehow finding my way into their bed and got up to go back into my own bedroom. My dad made me stop and turn around so he could look at the back of my leg in my calf/hamstring area. I let him, and I remember him touching my leg there and being confused and silent. I asked what was wrong, and they told me that the night before, around 3 a.m., I woke up screaming and practically almost broke their door down, banging on it and begging to be let inside. They locked their door at night. Being parents, they of course immediately knew something was wrong and opened the door without hesitation. My dad told me I clung to him, still screaming and crying that there was a demon under my bed and it scratched me. I told him my leg was burning and insisted something had hurt me. He turned the lights on and sure enough, both of them recall seeing a very distinct set of scratches on my leg. Spaced like human fingers, not like a cat scratch or a scrape from something. Intentional, red, raised scratches. My dad said he immediately investigated, but couldn't find anything. Looked under the bed with a flashlight, opened my closet, even walked around outside. Nothing. The house was locked and so were my windows. They let me sleep in their bed because I was understandably inconsolable and they didn't want me to sleep alone at that point anyway. When my dad checked my leg, the scratches were gone. There was nothing there, nothing to prove anything happened. It still shocks me to this day to think I don't remember a single moment except for the growling. Like it's been deleted from my memory. It could have been traumatic enough that I blocked it out, but immediately? Like, as in the very next day, being confused about the situation like it never happened? You could say I was just an anxious child with nightmares, but with both of my parents insisting it happened, I can't just downplay it and say nothing happened. It's a truly unexplainable event in my life. Curious as to what your thoughts are.
This story comes from a few situations that took place when I was in the 1st to 3rd grade in New Mexico. I can't remember the time of year because it happened a while ago. Ben, wanted to share this situation after reading other people's posts and finally wanted to share my stories. Part 1. I was at my grandparents' house to spend the night. I'll call my grandparents Nana and Pop. I stayed up with Nana until around 11 p.m. because, at the time, I wasn't really in contact with the internet and thought that 12 o'clock was the devil's hour. After reading the Bible with Nana, I was sent to bed in my mom's old room. Nana was in the den, and Pop had been asleep for a few hours. I woke up around midnight due to my fear of the time. I went to the restroom and felt like something was behind me. Although the bathroom was relatively close to my room, I almost went to bed immediately. I assumed that it was only around 20 to 30 minutes later when I woke to a figure that was around the same height as Pop. However, instead of being around 6 feet 2 inches, it was about 6 feet 10 inches, so the pitch-black figure had to bend its neck to fit under the door. The way its neck was tilted still unnerves me to this day. It wasn't abnormal for Pop to get up randomly, but the figure had no facial features. Once I saw it, it seemingly froze, and so did I. I didn't do the cliché of staring for seeming hours. Instead, I forced myself to go right back to sleep. Once again, I awoke 20 to 30 minutes later, and the figure was in the middle of my room, blocking the entrance even more. I wouldn't have tried to escape anyway. The same situation happened again, and I forcefully went to sleep. But the last time I woke, it was right above me, its body not accounting for the way its neck was bent. It was basically at a 90 degrees angle, peering down at me. With the time I had to look at it, I could make out extremely red, beady eyes and nothing else. I was stuck this time. I couldn't just force myself to sleep until it let me. I nodded off after what felt like an hour and awoke the next morning to go to sleep more in Nana's bed until Pop got back from a bike ride. Part 2. A few months later, I was sleeping over at my grandparents' house again, suppressing the previous situation so as not to hate their house because I love how calming it is. The same thing happened before I went to bed. I read the Bible and talked with Nana until I went to bed at 11 p.m. Once again, I woke up an hour later, but I was in the hallway on the right side next to the bathroom. Note, this was the first time I slept walked and the last time as far as I know. I went back to bed and didn't think too much of it until I woke up again further down the hallway in front of the entryway, which spooked me a bit because I never liked my grandparents' entryway. It's uncomfortably long but also somewhat short. I went back to bed like before, not thinking of it again. I now regret that I didn't try to wake anyone up. I woke up again past the entryway to a light knocking. I stood up, finally getting scared, and immediately ran to the den only to see Nana asleep. I don't know why, but I didn't wake her up, and I'm now surprised that she stayed asleep. I ran to Pop's room, and he was snoring as he does. Even then, I realized that if neither of them could be knocking, then who was at that door? While this was going on, the knocking increased in strength and speed without anyone waking up. This is why these stories are connected, because with the rapid banging on the door, I could barely see those beady eyes through the movements. Throughout my running around, I decided to run back to my room, and then it stopped as soon as I entered. But I still fell asleep fast enough to forget and suppress it until the morning. I didn't tell Nana or Pop. A few years later, I asked Nana early in the day if she had ever come across something paranormal. This was after I was exposed to the internet, but not after I came across some things on there. She described something that related to what happened to me, a large dark figure. She described it as a trickster, an entity that hid things and messed with her. I still didn't tell her what I came across, and I don't know if I should tell Nana or Pop. If anyone knows about this entire ordeal or what Nana and I should do, And if you live in NM, tell me if you know anything.
One early morning, the atmosphere was eerily silent. My house, usually filled with the noise of passing vehicles, was unnaturally quiet. I woke up from my sleep. The room was dim, the only light coming from the faint glow outside. I looked around and saw my brother sleeping beside me. Then, I saw him, a sad, ghostly figure in the corner of the room. Why was he sitting there? Who was he? Was I still dreaming? I rubbed my eyes, hoping he would vanish. But he remained, his head bowed, sitting at the table in the corner. His straight hair hung down, obscuring his face. I didn't recognize him. He wore a black jacket, his presence chilling. Who was he? A little boy, beautiful yet terrifying in the dim light. A cold shiver ran down my spine, my body still weak from a recent fever. Was I hallucinating? I tried to wake my brother, but he didn't respond. "Alex, who was sitting at the table?" I asked. No answer. Panic set in as I realized that only my brother and I were in the house. Fear gripped me, paralyzing me. I pulled the blanket over my head, praying the boy would disappear, praying this was just a nightmare. I peeked out, trembling. He was still there, head down, hair flowing, and dressed in black. He hadn't disappeared. He was still there. I hid, praying desperately, hoping he wouldn't see me. My prayers were disjointed and frantic. "God, please make him go away," I begged silently. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I lay there, terrified. The call to prayer finally broke the silence. Thank God, dawn had come. Slowly, I peeked out again, praying he was gone, and he was vanished as if he had never been there. Even as I grew older, that boy remained vivid in my memory. I wanted to erase his sadness, but I knew he wasn't from this world. Sometimes, I still feel his presence, watching over me from the shadows.
I don't know if this was a kidnapping attempt or not. What happened was I was about 4 at the time, going through foster care, and I was at another house. I liked it. It was one of the best foster homes I had, and they ended up adopting me. Back to the story. Before I was adopted and was new to the family, I was still shy. They told me to take out their dog, a corgi named Bella. I did as I was told, and while I was outside, something caught her attention, and she bolted down the road. We were at the stop sign a decent distance from my house. We stopped in front of this bigger dog and an older man, who looked about 20 to 30. I tried to pull Bella along, but she wouldn't listen. She was interested in the big dog. The man smiled and asked if I wanted to walk with him so he could walk me home. Me, being naive, said yes. We started walking in the direction of my house, with Bella following the man's dog. We eventually reached my house, but the man kept walking, and so did I because Bella wasn't stopping. The man noticed but didn't seem to care. We passed my house, but suddenly my foster mom came backing out in her car, panicking because I hadn't come inside yet. She crashed the car, got out, and saw me. I quickly ran to her. The man seemed like he was going to say something or reach out for me, but he noticed I was running to my mom and walked off. My mom hugged me tightly and took me inside. She told me not to follow strangers. I never saw the man again, but I'm not sure if it was a kidnapping attempt or not. If it was, I'm glad my mom came out when she did.